My parents lived rent-free in the back unit of my townhouse. Then they decided to demand I trade with my brother because he deserved a better start. They even showed me my house behind my back. Little did they know I'd already sold the entire building. I always thought I was doing the right thing for my family. It's funny how being a good daughter can be your biggest mistake. My name is Meg. And 6 months ago, I bought a townhouse in a quiet neighborhood outside Portland. It wasn't exactly my dream home, but it had potential 2 identical units, separate entrances, and a shared backyard. The real estate agent kept talking about the rental income I could earn. But I had other plans. My parents had been struggling since my father lost his job, and my mother's part-time job at the library barely covered the monthly groceries. "Daughter, we can't accept this," my mother said. As soon as I showed them the back unit, she was already analyzing the kitchen cabinets with that critical eye. "This isn't charity, Mom. Think of it as an investment in the family," I replied. My father stood there in the doorway with his hands in his pockets. "Your mother's right, Meg. We raised you to be independent, not to take care of us." But guess what? They moved anyway. Of course they did. The alternative would have been to live with my younger brother, Chris, and his girlfriend, Nina, in a cramped 1-bedroom apartment. That wouldn't have lasted 2 days without someone fighting. At first, it was actually quite good. Mom planted herbs in the backyard. Dad fixed a few things in both units. And I finally felt like I'd done something worthwhile with my engineering salary. But then the comments started. "I'm in the morning light is so much better in your unit," my mom said, drinking coffee with me like we did every week. "The one in the back feels like a cave sometimes." I stirred my coffee. "Mom, the plants are mirrored. It's exactly the same layout." "Maybe. But yours faces east. It makes all the difference." The following week, "Your kitchen has more counter space." "No, it doesn't." I wondered. "Well, it seems bigger." She sighed. "But we're very grateful. You know, I don't want it to seem like we're complaining." Emma, my best friend, warned me during lunch at work. "They're going to take advantage of your kindness. That's what families do." "Not Mina," I countered. "They're just adjusting." She just gave me that look. You know, the one that says sweet, diluted, without even opening her mouth. But life moved on. I waved goodbye to my mom when I left for work, helped my dad in the yard on weekends, and pretended not to notice the growing list of complaints about their house. The rent I wasn't charging was never mentioned, but the free maintenance, electricity, water, and internet bills, all of this became an obligation, not a favor. Until one day I found my front door ajar. I always lock it, always with my heart in my mouth. I slowly pushed the door open, looking around for signs of a break-in. Nothing seemed out of place in the room. The TV was still there. My laptop was intact on the coffee table. But something was off. In the kitchen, I found a glossy pamphlet on the counter, "Creating the Perfect Nursery from Dream to Reality." The cover showed a fully decorated nursery, with pale yellow walls and white furniture, except I don't have children. I'm not pregnant. Nor do I have a boyfriend. "Mom," I called, going to the door connecting the 2 units. "Did you come in here today? Just for a minute?" "Mira?" I heard her voice coming from the other side. "I was looking for the tape measure. I thought you might have it. And this pamphlet for the nursery here on my counter." Silence. "Oh?" It must have been Nina. She and Chris came by earlier. My stomach dropped. They just came in for a moment. Nina wanted to see the layout. They're thinking about having kids soon. You know, I stood there with the pamphlet in my hand, trying to understand what she wasn't saying. Why did my brother's girlfriend need to see my layout? Because they were measuring things in my house while I was working. "Next time," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "please don't let anyone in here without telling me first." "Meg, don't exaggerate. We're family." Family. That word that should mean everything, but in my case always ended up costing me something. I looked back at the pamphlet. Someone was clearly imagining a baby's room inside my home. My phone vibrated. Message from Emma friend. "You need to see what Nina just posted on Instagram." I already knew my peaceful life was about to be turned upside down. In the story, Nina twirled around smiling in what was unmistakably my bathroom. Captioned, "Tour of my future home." The cream tiles I'd chosen were clearly visible behind her. I watched it 3 times before calling Emma. "Tell me I'm crazy." "You're not crazy. That's definitely your bathroom. What's going on in there?" Before I could reply, Another message arrived. It was from Chris. But clearly not for me. Mom said Megs would relent once we explained. She's always been practical about these things. My hands were shaking as I took a screenshot. Right afterward, he sent, "Sorry, sis. Wrong message." I went straight to my parents' apartment and knocked loudly on the door. My mother answered with that look on her face that made her ready to justify any absurdity as if it were for our own good. "We need to talk," she said. Entering the room, my father was in the corner. As usual, pretending to be focused on the crossword. About what? Mira, I showed him the video of Nina on my phone. Why is my brother's girlfriend giving a tour of my house on social media? Mom sat down, smoothing her skirt. We were going to tell you straight up. Chris and Nina want to start a family. They need more space. And your unit would be perfect for it. The one in the back is fine for one person. And you live away from home. Working. The casualness with which she spoke, as if she were suggesting I change parking spaces, not homes, suffocated me. "Let me get this straight," I said. "You want me to give up the property I bought? Which I'll pay Chris, it's not giving up." My father finally spoke. Without taking his eyes off the newspaper. "It's trading. You'd still have somewhere to live. In a smaller, darker place. The very place you've been complaining about for months." Those weren't complaints. Mom waved her hand away. "Just observations. Besides, Chris needs it." "Chris needs it," I interrupted. "And what do I need?" "No one will ask. You already have your career. Mika. It's stable. Chris is just starting out. Nina wants to be a full-time mom. They need support. And I don't. I'm the one who bought this house. I gave you a home for free. Doesn't that count as support? It's different." Mom said, "You're just a slug." "What am I? You're strong. You've always managed." Those words were like a slap in the face. I've spent my life hearing variations of it. Meg can handle it. Meg is tough. Meg doesn't need help. And Chris, he doesn't have to handle it alone. He's 27. Mom, when will he learn to fend for himself? Family. And help. Family. My father murmured from the corner. Help or abuse? My mother's face grew serious. "You're being selfish. This isn't just about you. Think about your future niece or nephew. And that imaginary baby needs precisely my unit. The one I live in. The one I bought. Nina has already chosen the wall color." Mom said, as if that were the end of the matter. "She has a beautiful vision for the space." I laughed. I couldn't help but feel nervous. Indignant. At the sheer absurdity of it all. I didn't just say, "I'm not changing units. I'm not leaving here. And Chris and Nina aren't moving here. And this conversation is over. Just say you don't want us here anymore." Mom said. Her eyes narrowed. "I wanted you here. I wanted to help. What I don't want is to be pushed out of my own home to make way for your darling. That's not fair." "No. It's not. And that's why I'm leaving." I went back to my unit and called Emma. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Remember when we were kids and Chris broke my science project the day before the fair? And I ended up apologizing. Is it at that level? Worse? Now they're calling me selfish because I don't want to give up my house to my little brother." Emma was silent for a moment. "You know what that means? Right, what it's time to stop being the good daughter and start being smart. Forget your heart. Think about your bank account." I looked at the nursery pamphlet still on the counter. "What do you mean I think I know someone?" "A real estate agent named Kingsley. Want his number?" I thought about Chris's message. My mom's nonchalance. "The damn tape measure." "I do." The motion sensor alert went off on my phone at 2:17 p.m. I'd installed it that morning. Discreetly. Pointed at my door. Sitting at my desk at work. I opened the live feed. Chris and my dad entering my house. "Yeah. Are you sure she's at work?" Chris's voice was clear. "She never comes back before 5. My dad replied. "Where's the tape measure?" I turned up the volume. My hands shaking. "I found it. Nina wants to know if a king-size bed will fit in here." The camera showed Chris stretching the tape measure across my bedroom wall. Mom said Meg will understand when we explain the baby story. She knows how to handle her. Yeah. Meg always gives in eventually. Remember when she gave me her car in college? My dad laughed. The Toyota. And your mom convinced her you needed it more for your delivery job than she did for her engineering internship. Good times. Hey. Are these cabinets big enough to make a small room? I turned off the fed. The taste of the coffee turned to bile. Emma's desk was 2 cubicles away. I texted, "I need lunch now." 20 minutes later, we were sitting in Emma's car, parked behind the office building. I showed her the video. "Those spoiled brats." Emma interrupted. "Please tell me you called the police." "And what can I say that my dad and brother used a key my mom gave them to measure my room for some furniture they won't even buy?" She responded, picking up her cell phone. "But I'm going to call Kingsley now. This is getting too much. It's getting weird. The realtor you mentioned manages several properties on your street. There's an investment firm buying everything around there. They're paying above market value if you can turn over the vacant units." "Vacant?" I asked, watching her dial. "I mean, kick my parents out. I mean, stop being a doormat and start being strategic." She put it on speakerphone. Kingsley answered on the second ring with a calm, professional voice. "Emma, I'm glad you called. And is your friend ready to talk numbers?" he said. And she gave me a knowing look. "Very ready," she replied. "I'm representing Reed Scott Investments. There's a lot of interest in your area. They're paying a lot for multifamily properties, especially townhouses. But they need them to be vacant." I thought about the tape measure, Nina's Instagram tour, the way my mother completely ignored my feelings. "When you say hi, how much exactly do you mean?" He gave a number that almost made me choke on my iced tea. "It's considerable," I managed to say. "But there's a catch, the deadline. They want to close quickly. 3 weeks at most. Both units need to be vacant by then." Emma silenced the phone. "With that amount, you can buy a great apartment with a view and without any lazy relatives measuring your closet. I've got the sound back. Can you send me the paperwork? I'll send it today. Just remember to keep everything confidential until we're ready to announce it. These negotiations work best when everyone finds out at the same time." After we hung up, Emma looked at me carefully. "Is everything okay? I don't know. That seems fair." I was going to say terrifying. My phone vibrated. A voice message in the family group. Chris's excited voice filled the car. "Mom, Dad, I can't thank you enough for making this happen. This is my first big step toward adulthood. And I couldn't do it without you. Nina's already planning the baby's room." Emma raised an eyebrow. Still scared, I played the audio again, letting my brother's arrogant confidence permeate the room. He didn't even bother to exclude me from the group. That was how he was sure I'd give in. "Giving me Kingsley's email," I said, back at work. I couldn't concentrate. The ad Kingsley sent showed my townhouse from the street. A simple but well-kept building, with the new paint job I'd paid for myself last spring. The offer letter was in my inbox, the cursor blinking in the signature field. My phone vibrated again. A message from Mom. "Meg, come to dinner with us tonight. We need to talk about some necessary improvements to your unit. Nothing major. Just a few changes to make it more suitable for a young couple." Their audacity made me laugh out loud. They weren't even trying to hide anything anymore. I replied, "Sure. Mom, let's talk about the changes." So, I opened Kingsley's email and signed the preliminary paperwork. Emma texted me. "Did you? I just signed? Is it wrong to feel nothing?" "Nothing wrong with that. It's called self-esteem. It's coming back." I went back to the family group. There was another audio from Chris. "I can't wait to upgrade this place. No offense, Max, but your style is kind of basic." I was tempted to reply and tell him exactly how basic his apartment search was without any free options. But I just closed the chat and emailed Kingsley. "Papers signed. Let's make this happen." Sometimes the best revenge isn't a scandalous argument. Sometimes it's a quiet signature on a document no one saw coming. Kingsley's office was exactly what you'd imagine. Glass, chrome, and expensive coffee. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than my first car and smiled like he knew the value of everything. "Reed Scott is very interested in your property," he said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Location, condition, potential, it ticks all the boxes. And they really need the 2 units vacated. Company policy. They're planning major renovations." He paused. "I know there could be personal complications. I thought about the message my mother had sent this morning. Nina's parents want to see the nursery space next week. We'll use your spare key." "No hassle," I replied, opening the folder. Numbers made me dizzy. The down payment alone would pay for a nice apartment. The total could buy something outright in a much better neighborhood. 3 weeks is quick. That's why the offer is so generous. Reed Scott values speed. He pointed to the papers. "Of course. If it's too tight." "It's not. I picked up the pen I used to sign. As I scribbled my signature on the pages, Kingsley explained the process. The deposit would be due in a few days. The full payment would be ready at closing. All I had to do was make sure both units were vacant and notify the tenants as you normally do. We usually post formal notices as soon as the lease is finalized. But in your case, it might be better to handle it yourself. I mean, tell them in person, he shrugged. Sometimes it's easier to let the paper speak for you. At work, Emma showed up at my desk with coffee. Okay. 3 weeks until closing. So, how are you feeling? I stared at my computer. An email from my mom was there. Unread. Suggestions for improvements to your unit. Attached. I feel like I'm either the worst daughter in the world or the only sensible person in the family. Go with the second option. Emma said, sitting at my desk. Have you started looking for a new place? Yet I found some options. There's an apartment downtown. My phone vibrated. Sis. Nina's parents are coming over next week to see the apartment. Is everything okay with you? I replied. Sorry. Too much work. I won't be able to do it. Those 3 little balls appeared. No problem. We have the key. The naturalness with which he said this only made my decision easier. He opened Mom's email. The attached document was titled Necessary Changes for Chris and Nina's New Home. The list was extensive. Remove personal items from the master bedroom. Nina wants a fresh start. Paint the walls neutral colors. The current ones are too dark. Replace the shower head. Chris prefers the rain shower head. Install new closet organizers. Nina needs more shoe space. Remove the desk. This will be the baby's room. At the end, Mom even wrote, can we start this weekend? No need to thank me. It's a pleasure to help. Emma read over my shoulder. Oh. No way. Calm down. It gets better, I said. Scrolling down the file, they had created a timeline for my move into the back unit. According to the plan, I was supposed to be out by the end of the month so they could prepare the space for Nina and Chris. End of the month. That's a week before the eviction notice officially goes out. Karma's kicking in, Emma said. I closed the email without replying and opened the real estate listings. A corner apartment caught my eye. 12th floor. City view. No relatives with spare keys. Is that the one? Emma said, pointing to the screen. Look at that balcony. My phone vibrated again. Another Nina story on Instagram. I can't wait to transform this space. Sorry about the current decor. The previous resident's taste was basic. The previous resident? Me. I had become this. I clicked the contact button on the ad and scheduled a visit for late afternoon. Want some company? Emma asked. Actually, yes. I need someone to remind me that I'm not going crazy. You're not crazy. You're just defending yourself. Finally, another message on the phone. This time it was from my father. His mother had thought carefully about these improvements. Don't make things difficult. Don't make things difficult. The family motto. At least when it came to me. Seda. Swallow. Don't make a fuss. I turned off my phone and grabbed my keys. Let's see my new home. One without a key hidden under the rug. Now. Yes. Leaving the office, I felt lighter than I had in months. In 3 weeks, they would understand what happens when you cross the line. In 3 weeks, I would be free. But first, I had an apartment to buy and a poker face to practice. That night, my mother served more pasta. Smiling, this sauce is delicious. Micah, too bad the kitchen in the back unit doesn't have enough space for proper cooking. I smiled and filled her wine glass. Family dinner. My last in this house. But they didn't know it yet. The sale was 2 weeks away. And I'd already mastered the art of pretending everything was fine. I've been thinking about what you said, I told my mom, watching her face light up. About the unit swap? Chris nearly choked on his garlic bread. Seriously, you're okay with this? Oh. You know what family is first and foremost. The words came out with a vinegary taste. Oh my God. This is perfect, Nina said, clapping her hands. I even have paint samples picked out. And just wait until you see the mood board I put together for the little room. My dad looked uncomfortable, as he always did when things seemed too easy. That's very generous of you, Meg. It's nothing, I replied, getting up to clear the table. I just need to figure out the best time to make the move. Later, after they returned to the back unit, I crossed another item off my secret list. Hosting the last family dinner. Next, removing my name from the water. Electricity. and internet bills. My phone vibrated with a message from Kingsley. Paperwork finalized. Reed Scott confirmed the closing date. Eviction notices will be posted within a week. I'd already moved most of my important things to a storage unit. The downtown apartment was now mine, purchased with the down payment. I already had the keys. Emma had helped me move boxes overnight. Always discreetly. Mags, Chris's voice came through the door connecting the two units. Can I come in, sure? I quickly completed the moving checklist on my phone. He came in and looked around the already half-packed room. I just wanted to say thank you. This means a lot to us. Imagine, I said, pointing to a box. I'm just organizing some things. Do you want help packing? He picked up a framed childhood photo of us. Wow. Remember when I ruined your science project and you still helped me finish mine? I remember. You were always the responsible one. The level-headed one. She sat with the photo in her hands. Mommy said, you're okay with moving in next week. I kept my expression neutral. I'm still working out the details. Nina's parents are coming on Sunday to see the apartment. They're thrilled with the idea of their grandson growing up here. My phone vibrated again. Kingsley. Printed eviction notices. Ready to be served whenever you want. That's great, I said, putting my phone back in my pocket. Everything's falling into place. Chris hugged me. Something he hadn't done in years. You're the best sister in the world. I promise we'll transform this place. After he left, I went to change the locks on the back doors. Another item on the list. Check. Through the window, I saw Mom in the kitchen, probably planning more improvements for my house. Emma called while I was finishing the locks. How does Peeker's Oscar-worthy little face look? Are they really planning a little room in a home they'll never live in? Yeah. Right? And the notices will be posted in a week, right after Nina's parents' tour. And her mother is still sending a list of demands. Today. Now the kitchen cabinets need to be updated before Chris moves in. Her nerve is impressive. In Nina's mood board, I've seen less detailed renovations on soap operas. She wants to paint over the walls. I just renovated last year. In the new apartment, I smiled, thinking about my little corner downtown. Beautiful. No family. No drama. Just peace and quiet. And no spare keys lost anywhere. Exactly. My phone pinged with a message in the family group. Good news. We've invited Nina's parents to see where the boys will raise their grandson. Sunday at 2 p.m. Meg, please make your unit presentable. I replied. I can't wait. You're mean, Emma said. I'm not practical. That's not what they always said about me. One more message. Next week, we need to start moving your things into the back unit. Chris and Nina want to paint before the baby's furniture arrives. I didn't reply. Instead, I looked at my list. Change locks. Remove valuables. Transfer accounts. Last thing, family dinner. Secure a new home. There was only one thing left. Watch it all unfold. Nina posted another Instagram story. Sunday is the big day. I can't wait to show everyone our future home. I saved the story. A reminder for when the guilt hits. Though surprisingly, she hadn't shown up yet. Maybe because every abusive message, every senseless demand, every boundary crossed had killed a little of the remaining guilt. Just one more week of pretending. Just one more week of smiling and waving. Or just one more week, until they learned what happens when they mistake kindness for weakness. I turned off the lights in my nearly empty house and went to sleep dreaming of karma in the form of eviction notices. The notices were posted promptly at 9 a.m. On Monday, I heard my mother scream from the other side of the wall, followed by frantic knocking on my door. Meg. Open this door. I took a deep breath and went to answer it. She shoved the paper in my face, her hands shaking. Is this a joke? I made sure to read it out loud. Eviction notice. Property sold. 3 weeks to vacate. I looked at her. I got one too. Oh. This can't be right. Chris stormed in with Nina right behind him. They can't just sell the building. Actually, I said. They can. I already called the number on the notice. Dad showed up last. Why does a sheet? And what did they say? A company called Reed Scott Investments bought the entire building. They're going to renovate both units. Nina started crying. But what about the little room? We already had everything planned. We can handle this, Mom said, trying to console Nina. Meg, call them. Tell them you own this unit. It was correct. The sale is already final. Chris picked up his cell phone. I'm calling a lawyer. They can't do this to us. Right on cue. A black car pulled up in front of the house. Kingsley got out, briefcase in hand. Such punctuality. I said, "This is the broker." Everyone looked out the window as he approached with that impeccable executive air. He knocked on the door. "Good morning," he said. "I represent Reed Scott Investments. I see you received our notices." Mom stepped forward. "There must be some mistake. My daughter owns the building." "Former owner?" Kingsley corrected. Opening the folder, "The sale was finalized last week. I have the paperwork here." Chris ripped out the documents and began to read desperately. "It can't be. Wait." He stared at me. "Bae, this is from 2 weeks ago. Did you already know I kept my face impassive? I got the same offer you're holding there. Reed Scott is buying up properties all over the neighborhood. And why didn't you tell us?" Nina demanded. "Would it have made a difference? The offer was too good to refuse." Mom's face went from red to white. "You sold it without even telling us. Just like you guys who were going to kick me out of my house without telling me." The silence was total. Kingsley cleared his throat. "The terms are very clear. Both units must be vacated within 3 weeks. Reed Scott is willing to offer a modest contribution to the moving costs." "Help moving?" Chris laughed bitterly. "We already had everything planned here." "Your future," I said. "Calm down. Inside my house," which you measured behind my back. The realization hit my father first. "Meg, the notices are legal." Kingsley continued. "All the paperwork is in order. I suggest you take this time to find another place to live." Nina cried again. "But my parents already bought the baby furniture. It arrives next week. So I suggest you cancel the delivery," I said. Mom came closer, lowering her tone. "You planned this. She's not our daughter anymore. And I stopped feeling like your daughter when you decided my house belonged to Chris." Kingsley handed over some packets of brochures. "Oh, here are some rental options in the area and recommendations for moving companies. Reed Scott, thanks you for your cooperation." Chris crumpled the brochure. "This won't stand. We'll fight. Feel free," Kingsley said. "But remember, the sales contract is tamper-proof." Senorita Valdez's lawyer took care of it. Everyone turned to me. "Did you hire a lawyer?" my father asked. "I learned from the best," I replied. "Family comes first." "Right." Nina stomped out, followed by Chris, yelling about lawsuits. Mom stood there, clutching the eviction notice like a life preserver. 3 weeks, Kingsley reminded her. "After that, any remaining occupants will be legally removed." Dad grabbed Mom's arm. "Come on, Yolanda, we need to think." They left without even looking at me. Kingsley only spoke when they were out of sight. "There. The final documents are ready whenever you want to sign." I nodded, looking out the window, watching my family huddled in their unit, probably already plotting their next move. "They'll try to reverse this," Kingsley warned. "Let them try. I learned something important recently." "And what was it?" "Sometimes the best revenge isn't just serving karma. It's serving karma with the right paperwork." Kingsley smiled and got back in the car. I closed the door to my empty unit, feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone vibrated. "Emma, what happened?" "It's over," I replied. "Freedom in 3 weeks." "And how are you feeling?" I looked at the mood board of the little room Nina had left on my counter last week, as if I'd finally worked up the courage. And it's wonderful. Moving day arrived with the screeching of truck brakes and the thud of boxes. Emma and I stood on the sidewalk watching the movers empty the 2 units. My parents' furniture went into a storage unit. They'd found a small apartment on the other side of town. My remaining things went straight to my new apartment. "They haven't spoken to you yet?" she asked. "Chris tried to sue me yesterday." His lawyer looked at the sales contract and immediately withdrew. A loud noise from inside made us jump. Nina stormed out, mascara running down her face. "This is all your fault," she yelled. "You were planning on living in my house." I corrected. "This is very different. But we're family. Family doesn't measure rooms hidden behind each other's backs." She raised her arms. "It was just for measuring. We were trying to plan the future in my house, without even consulting me. Because they knew I'd say no." "Exactly. I saw the movers taking away the sofa I bought last year. And that should have been your answer from the start." Chris appeared right behind her, dejected. "Come on, Nina. It's not worth it. It's not worth it." She turned to him. "Your sister ruined our future. And you think it's not worth it? Our future, eh? You mean the future where you redecorate my house? Raise kids in my space? And I would disappear into the back unit like a good little sister. You're just jealous. She spat enviously because we're going to start a family and you're alone. Emma took a step forward. But I held up my hand. I'm not alone. Nina. I'm free. There's a huge difference. Free for what? To live in a soulless condominium while we kill ourselves looking for a place. You could try paying for one like I did. I suggested. Chris grabbed Nina's arm. Let's go. We still have things to pack. This was our only chance. She yelled at him. Your parents promised us this house. It was never theirs to promise. I spoke softly. Nina jerked away. You're just a spoiled little boy who never grew up. She snapped. And I'm tired of waiting for you to get your act together. We watched her get in the car and drive off. Tires screeching. Chris stood there, looking lost. This was my chance to prove myself. Prove your worth by stealing what was mine. You always had it all planned out. The good job. The house. The life. I planned it while working. You should try it someday. He shook his head. You don't understand. Mom and Dad. Mom and Dad. What did they promise you my house? Did they make you believe it was right to take away what I'd built? They just wanted it. I know what they wanted. They wanted you comfortable. Stable. With everything in hand. And I was supposed to give up everything I'd achieved for that. The truck started up, leaving the garage empty. Through the window, I saw my mother sitting in the bare living room, staring into space. You should have built your own future. Chris. Instead of trying to steal mine, he left without a word. His shoulders slumped. My father emerged soon after, a small box of photos in his hands. Your mother kept all your school photos, he said without looking at me. Even the ones you didn't want to smile at. I've never been much for faking happiness. I replied. He straightened the box. We really thought you'd understand that Chris needed a chance. I understood perfectly. I just said it. I stopped nodding. Mom appeared in the doorway. We're ready, I said to Dad, pretending I wasn't even there. They got into the car full of suitcases without saying a word to me. I saw Mom wipe her eyes before they left. Emma put her hand on my arm. It's okay. Honestly, I am. I watched the last moving truck turn the corner. It hurt. Sure. But it didn't hurt nearly as much as letting them take everything. Want to go see your new home? Without drama. Without lazy siblings. Without tape measures, I smiled. Actually, I want to do one last thing. We walked through the two now empty units. My footsteps echoed in the rooms that once held so many dreams. Theirs and mine. In what had been my room, Nina's paint samples, baby yellow and breathy white, were still taped up. I ripped them off one by one. Ready? Emma asked, standing in the doorway. Ready. Outside. I locked both doors for the last time. The keys would go to Kingsley the next day, along with the final papers. Hey, Emma said as we walked to the car. Remember what you told me when you bought this place, what family is everything. Funny how things change. I looked back at the empty house. Family is everything. I repeated, until the moment it costs you everything. The city light shone through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new apartment. Emma poured the wine. The space felt different from the old townhouse. And cleaner. Lighter. As if the air had been filtered of all guilt and obligation. Bought with cash and with a clean soul. Emma toasted. My phone vibrated. A message from Kingsley. Reed Scott just listed the townhouse. Asking price. Double what they paid. Wow, Emma said, looking at the screen. They don't waste time. Good for them. I replied. I looked at the listing photos. They'd already ripped everything from both units. Every trace of the life I'd built there. The dreams my family tried to steal. Was gone. No sign of them yet. Chris drunkenly texted me last week. He said something about Nina moving back in with her parents. Apparently, she'd grown tired of waiting for him to grow up. And your parents' mom blocked me. Dad responds with okay to Christmas messages. He seems calm. A notification appeared. Nina had untagged me from all future home-type posts. The nursery mood board disappeared from my feed, as if it had never existed. You know what's funny, I said. Going to the window. I used to lose sleep, wondering if I wasn't being too harsh. If I shouldn't have given in. Moved back. Let them do what they wanted. And now I sleep like an angel. Emma joined me at the window. Below, the city went on with its rhythm. People moving. Building. Living. I met your mother at the market. I said softly. He was comparing the price of canned soup. living within his means. Finally, he asked about you. He tried to pretend it was just curiosity, but I could tell he wanted to know if you regretted it. And what did you say? That you're glowing. That your new apartment has incredible natural light. Emma smiled. Karma doesn't always come knocking. Sometimes she signs the deed. I laughed, remembering Mom's face when Kingsley showed up with the eviction notices. Had they learned anything, Chris? Yes. Is working 2 jobs now. Trying to save up enough money to have his own place. No more waiting for everything to be handed to him. My phone vibrated again. Unknown number. It's Dad. I changed my phone. Your mom won't admit it. But she misses you. I showed it to Emma. Will you answer? I thought about it. I really thought about it. Maybe when they're ready to see me as an adult. Someone with limits. Not a resource to be exploited. And if that day never comes, then I'll continue enjoying my view. Emma refilled our glasses. Remember in college, when Chris crashed your borrowed car, and your parents made you split the insurance premium? God, I'd almost forgotten that. You didn't forget anything. You just stopped accepting. The city lights blurred a bit as I blinked, holding back unexpected tears. I miss who I thought they were. The family I wanted them to be. But not who they really are. No. Yet another message from my dad. We messed up. And messed up badly. I saw the cursor blinking, waiting for more. But it didn't come. This is new. I said. About admitting mistakes. But too late. I put down my phone. They can keep their regrets. I'll keep my peace. The moon rose over the buildings, casting long shadows across my new home. Without tape measures. No plan for a disaster. No guilt. No. Emma said, raising her glass. The boundaries. The consequences. Finally putting herself first. My phone vibrated for the last time. Kingsley. Reed Scott received an offer for the townhouse above the asking price. Karma is profitable these days. I said, smiling and hanging up the phone. I let Reed Scott keep the profit. I got something better. Freedom. You know what the best part is, I said, throwing myself onto the new sofa. I don't have a spare key hidden anywhere. Emma laughed. No more visitors and surprises. No more surprises. Period. Outside. The city pulsated with possibilities. Here inside. The space was all mine. Measured only by my dreams. Decorated only by my choices. The guilt was gone. In its place was something stronger. Certainty. They say home is where the heart is. But sometimes home is where you learn to protect your heart. Even from family. Especially from family. I raised my glass to the city lights. To the empty rooms filled with peace. To karma in its proper timing. To measuring life by my standards. Not theirs. And somewhere that night, a family learned that actions have consequences. That arrogance has its limits. And that some bridges, when burned, light the path to something better. Vought. Story 2. My parents told me, give your business to your sister or get lost when I left home. They mocked me and made my life miserable. But thanks to that, today, I owe them nothing. I wasn't a millionaire. But in my world of warm bread and sourdough, I felt fulfilled. I started working at my parents' bakery when I was 12. Not because they forced me, but because it was our meeting place. Our refuge. My dad had been baking for as long as I could remember. And my mom kept accounts with a precision bordering on the obsessive. I loved being there. There was something special about watching soft, golden bread emerge from nothing. The yeast silently working its magic as the oven transformed everything into something people took home with a smile. Over time, I learned a little bit of everything baking. Serving customers. Taking orders. Checking inventory. Cleaning grease cake trays. Even mending old shelves when they were out of date. I didn't study business administration or gourmet cooking. I learned alongside my parents. In their own way. With scoldings that hurt, but also with pride when something turned out well. And although they were the legal owners of the place, from the age of 19, they let me take the reins while they gradually retired with the excuse that they'd worked enough and deserved a rest. I would wake up at 4 a.m., put on the same old t-shirt, and drive in the dark to the store. A small space smelling of butter and an old oven that became my center of gravity. It was routine. Yes, but not monotonous. Each batch of bread had its own story. Every customer who came to get their morning sweet roll knew me by name. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that some of the children who greeted me on bicycles now drive and bring their own children. I felt part of the fabric of the neighborhood. I didn't have luxuries. I didn't have time for vacations. But every weekend, when I saw the empty trays, I knew I was doing something right. All of that began to shake the day. My younger sister, Julia, returned from college with a framed marketing diploma and more ideas than she could back up with real-world experience. She was never a bad person. She just never understood that what we had wasn't just a business. It was history. It was heritage. It was the kind of place that didn't need to be reinvented with garish colors and English phrases. She'd always been the favorite. That had been an open secret since we were kids. But it didn't bother me. I learned to live with it. The difference was that this time it wasn't about who sat up front in the car or who got the new phone. This time it was about the only thing she had. The only thing she knew how to do. Everything exploded at Thanksgiving dinner. I had baked 3 pies, all using my grandmother's original recipe. The house was full. Everyone talking at once. There was laughter, noise, and rich smells wafting from the kitchen. Between the toast and the second course, my mother cleared her throat and began speaking in that sweet tone she used when she knew I was about to say something rude but wanted to sound reasonable. He said Julia had returned with her mind full of new ideas, that she had studied precisely for that purpose, to renew what we had lovingly maintained for so long. But in his words, without evolution, any business dies. He then added that it was time to pass on responsibility for the business to someone with a modern vision. My dad, without even looking up from the turkey, blurted out that I could stay on as a baker's helper if he wanted me to keep it simple, that it was best for everyone. Just like that, without any anesthesia. I remember not even being able to answer right away. I stared at the fork, the edge of the tablecloth, the candles, anything but their faces. I thought it was a joke, that at any moment someone was going to burst out laughing and say, "Just kidding, San. Relax." But no one did. Julia, on the contrary, already had a folder in her bag with proposals, new colors, rebranding ideas, even a plan to launch social media with viral promotions. That's when I realized this wasn't just a hasty decision. This had been brewing for a while. The decision had already been made, and I hadn't even been invited to the conversation. I didn't sleep that night. I packed my recipe notebooks in a suitcase, grabbed my old laptop and 2 changes of clothes, and went to sleep on a friend's couch. I left quietly. I closed the door without slamming it. I left the keys on the counter. I didn't say anything in the family group. I didn't send a single message. I didn't cry, even though my throat burned as if it needed to. I hoped the next day one of them would reconsider, that they'd think they'd made a mistake, that they'd at least call me to ask me to come back and help with the flour. Because without me, they wouldn't even know where the rye bread pan was. But what I received was a notification on social media. They'd posted a photo of Julia smiling at the counter under a new sign that said "New Cycle, New Ideas, New Era." They didn't even mention my name. That's how it all began. The uprooting, to the chill in my bones, the resentment that boiled inside me. But I couldn't find a way out. I had no plan. No money saved. No important contacts. I only had my hands, my recipes, and an anger so deep it forced me to get up before sunrise, just so I wouldn't be left lying in bed, thinking I'd been thrown out like an old piece of furniture. If you ask me today, it was that anger, that fire that comes when you're pulled out of your own story, that saved me. Because if I hadn't felt it, I probably would have gone back, bowed my head, accepted whatever position they gave me. And today I'd be there, serving coffee under my sister's orders. But I decided not to return. And from that point on, everything changed, even though they didn't know it yet. Update 1. 3 months had passed since that Thanksgiving night, which I mentally erased from all my family memories. Although I still sometimes woke up in the middle of the night with the echo of my dad's words echoing in my head. 3 months in which the winter cold had seeped into my bones. Not so much because of the weather, but because of the way my family had decided to become a soulless company, where the last name no longer meant belonging, but rather usefulness. I slept on a friend's couch, who, luckily, wasn't charging me rent yet, but whose patience wasn't eternal. In the early days, I lived between silent rage and uncertainty. I was resentful, but not paralyzed. As soon as I could, I went out looking for work. I knocked on doors at bakeries, fruit shops, cafes, even small neighborhood supermarkets. I wasn't looking to start over with something as big as what I had, because I knew that would take time. But I did need to keep moving, get my hands dirty, and feel like I wasn't getting rusty. In the end, it was at an Argentine empanada shop that I got a chance. The owner, Nico, was a friendly, somewhat chaotic guy who said he cooked by ear, and that if I knew how to knead and bake without YouTube recipes, I had a place with him. With Nico, I started earning just enough to survive. But the important thing wasn't the money, it was feeling like what I was doing was worth something. While he took care of the savory empanadas, I began experimenting with baked desserts that weren't part of the menu but that customers started asking for regularly. Donuts filled with dulce de leche, guava pastries, and rolls glazed with brown sugar and cinnamon. We didn't advertise them. They didn't have a name or pretty packaging. But people asked about them. 2 weeks later, Nico quietly told me that these sweets sold more than anything savory, and that if I needed space to make more, I could use the oven when he finished his batch. That's when I started cooking in the evenings, preparing batches that I then wrapped in foil with my handwritten initials, and that sold out before noon. One day, while we were unloading a box of flour and chatting about the state of the commercial rental market, Nico told me something I wouldn't get out of my head for weeks. He said, "With what you're doing, one day you're going to need your own trailer. This truck's too small for you." At first, I took it as a compliment, but then I took it seriously. I logged into forums, checked out auctions, visited lots where they kept used trucks in poor condition, and talked to more mechanics than I can count. All my savings fit into a worn-out wallet. But I knew a girl who worked at the neighborhood co-op and used to buy bread at the old store when she was still working. I told him my idea, showed him pictures, and even brought him a box of donuts I'd made that morning with frozen hands. He didn't promise anything. But 2 weeks later they called and told me I'd been approved for a modest loan not to buy anything new, but to get a used trailer and a portable stove. I called it Ring Sam. Using white paint and red letters, I brought myself along with cardboard stencils. It had no LED lights, no clever slogan, no social media, no designer-made logo. What it did have was a smell. The smell of baked bread, real butter, vanilla, and cinnamon. I would park in the wee hours of the morning in a dusty lot across from an industrial park where most people would get to work at 6 but arrive at 5:30 looking for something warm to eat. That's where word started to spread. At first I'd sell 3 dozen, then 5. Then I'd have to say no more because the portable oven couldn't handle the job. I had new employees, no helpers, and no cash register. He had a cookie tin where he kept crumpled bills and a notebook where he wrote down who came in often and what he liked. The first time I felt real satisfaction, not just professionally, but personally. That was one morning when a sleepy-faced customer with chapped hands approached the trailer window and said to me, not knowing who I was, "The donuts from the old place don't taste like anything anymore, but yours make my morning better." It didn't show, but inside I broke down. Not because it hurt, but because it was the first time in months that someone had validated my work without knowing the underlying story. It was an honest judgment, unencumbered by my last name, unshadowed by my parents or my sister, just bread and flavor. While this was happening in my small but solid world, on the other side of the city, things seemed to be going in the opposite direction. Some acquaintances texted me on my cell phone to tell me that the old place no longer smelled the same, that the dough tasted different, that everything was now more expensive and less tasty. They told me Julia had painted a mural on the facade, that they now sold gluten-free, low-carb keto donuts, and that regular customers didn't understand the menu nor wanted to understand it. They raised the prices because, according to her, it gave the place status. One even sent me a photo of the interior, where the counter had neon lights and the old metal trays had been replaced with transparent boxes with unpronounceable names. I didn't answer those messages. I didn't say anything. I didn't react publicly, but I saved them all. And as I baked, at 3 a.m., with oldies playing in the background and my knuckles covered in flour, I couldn't help but smile at the thought that all the contempt I'd been treated with had pushed me right to where I needed to be. Because if I hadn't been fired, if I hadn't been forced to start from the bottom, I wouldn't know what it feels like to earn a living with my own hands without owing anyone a single crumb. Update 2. A little over half a year had passed since I started Rising Sam. And by that point, I was already known by name on at least 4 industrial lots. The security guards nodded at me, even if they were sleepy. The employees set aside the exact change for me, and sometimes asked me to save a dozen like yesterday. And there was even a group of teachers who contacted me by text message asking me to bring supplies to the elementary school where they worked. It was all word of mouth. I didn't have active social media because, honestly, I didn't have the time to think about it. I would get up at 3:30 in the morning. Knead. Bake. Pack. Load the trailer. Park. Take care of everyone. And then, when the day was half over for everyone, I was back washing trays in a shared storage unit I rented by the hour. I would eat standing up, napping, if necessary, before getting ready for the next day. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't profitable yet. But every day I was getting closer to that point where I could say my hard work was translating into something tangible. I didn't have much, but the little I had was mine. Clean. Worked with scraped elbows and flour-covered nails. At the same time, I began to notice a curious pattern. Some of the esquientes from my parents' bakery were now appearing in my ranks. Some recognized me and made a gesture of respect. Others pretended not to see me, but bought things anyway. A woman who used to go to the old place every Sunday with her husband. An older couple who always ordered the same glazed roll and black coffee. Told me one morning without a filter, "We went to your old place, but there's no soul in there anymore. It smells like plastic and cheap perfume. This is real bread." My boy. I remained silent. I nodded. I gave him back the change with a hand that was trembling inside, but firm on the outside. That feeling of doing things right without having to humiliate anyone nourished me more than any breakfast. But what really brought a bitter smile to my face was what came next. It turns out that Julia, frustrated by the obvious drop in clients, had begun to become active on social media, particularly on Instagram, where she recorded herself talking with a beauty filter and making lectures about how entrepreneurship is a matter of attitude, or you have to modernize traditions. Most of her posts went unnoticed, but one reached me thanks to a former schoolmate who sent it to me with the note, "Are you watching this?" It was a video of Julia standing in the back of the bakery, wearing a spotless apron without a single flour stain, telling the camera that her business was suffering from unfair competition from certain food trucks that were parking without permission and unethically stealing customers. She didn't mention my name, but everyone knew who she was referring to. To top it all off, my mother had commented on the same video with Caritas, crying and saying things like, "Jealousy prevents those who work hard from prospering." That's when I realized that not only had they kicked me out, but now they were seeking to discredit what I had built from scratch. And the most absurd thing was that I never got involved with them. I didn't make any posts. I didn't air what they'd done to me. I didn't speak ill of the family business or my sister. Not even when I learned from a reliable source that Miguel had been fired. The old baker who had been with us for over 20 years because his style didn't fit with the new aesthetic of the place. Miguel, who knew all the recipes by heart and was practically part of the family, was now out of work because he didn't match the new wall colors. It was then that I began to consider something I was afraid of. But that didn't seem so far off the horizon. There was an abandoned warehouse in the old part of town, near where I was sleeping when it all started. The place had been a hardware store, but it had been closed for a year. I heard from a newspaper that it was for sale at a reasonable price because it had accumulated debts with the city. The idea tickled me. I didn't have all the money, but I knew someone who did. One of my regular customers. A guy in his 50s who always asked me for 2 donuts with molten chocolate. He had told me he was a private investor and that he supported local businesses that had real potential, not smoke and mirrors. I went to him, presented my numbers, showed him photos of how we started, let him try my products. And in a meeting that lasted less than an hour, he said yes. It wasn't just any loan. He would put up the money in exchange for a small percentage of profits without ever interfering in operational decisions. We sealed the deal with a handshake and the signature of a lawyer friend of his. A few days later, I began the purchasing process. While all this was going on, a reporter from the local newspaper approached my trailer with genuine curiosity. She told me she'd been hearing about the hot donut truck for weeks and wanted to know who the man behind it was. He interviewed me right there, without cameras, without invasive recorders, just taking notes and laughing when I told him I slept on an inflatable mattress in a shared storage room. The article appeared 2 weeks later in the Sunday edition. It was titled "The Breadwinner's Son," like a young man who was kicked out of his own family. He found joy and success on the streets. It wasn't sensationalist, but it was direct. He elegantly mentioned that he had inherited a legacy that was later taken away from him, and how that didn't stop him. The article went viral in the neighborhood, not nationally or anything like that, but enough so that the next day he had longer than usual lines and more calls than he could answer. Among those calls, there was one in particular that made me close my eyes. It was from the school district. They wanted to know if I could supply school cafeterias with preservative-free baked goods. Something fresh and homemade. They didn't have a huge budget, but they were looking for quality. And apparently, a group of teachers had already told them about me. I immediately agreed. Not only because of the money, but because of what it meant to enter through the front door, without having to ask anyone's permission, without owing favors to those who had previously turned their backs on me. Shortly after, I learned, thanks to a former neighbor who was always more gossipy than discreet, that my parents' place, the one Julia decorated like a television set, now had a for sale sign. Dealing with the bank, I had a hard time processing it. I called the bank just to verify if it was true, and it was. My parents, according to public records, had mortgaged the building to finance all the renovations and the new era they'd been touting. But since sales didn't take off and expenses mounted with every cosmetic whim, they couldn't keep up with the payments. I didn't laugh. I didn't feel happy. I felt at peace because I understood that life, when one acts with dignity and focuses on working without seeking immediate revenge, takes care of settling the score in due time. I hadn't thrown a stone, but I was already seeing the cracks in the castle they had built on my back. And they still didn't know that the worst for them and the best for me was just beginning. Update 3. A year and a half had passed since the night I walked out that door without looking back. My throat in knots and my soul torn between wounded pride and the certainty that despite everything, I had done the right thing. By then, I was no longer just the guy selling donuts from a trailer parked in front of the factories. My life and my work had changed so much, and so quietly but constantly, that I almost didn't realize the exact moment I stopped surviving and started growing. What had initially been an improvised project between night shifts and borrowed ovens had become a formal business with permits, organized accounting, and finally a small but committed team. I hired 2 guys who had also been kicked out of the family bakery by my sister, including Miguel, the longtime baker, who came back to work with me with a smile I hadn't seen on him since we were kids. Every time I saw him carrying the trays with worn gloves, moving with that precision that only age can bring, I felt like everything was where it should be. The warehouse he had purchased with the help of an investor became our production center. It wasn't large or luxurious, but it had what we needed: 2 industrial ovens, space to store raw materials, a stainless steel table where we worked as if we were in an operating room, but with flour up to our necks and laughter in the background. The days were long, yes, but I no longer felt like I was rowing against the current. I had even managed to set aside a small office in the brightest corner, where I could organize orders, receive suppliers, and even have the luxury of rejecting proposals that didn't fit the spirit of the business. And that, for someone who had been sleeping on an inflatable mattress just a year ago, was unthinkable. But the most surreal thing happened on a random Monday afternoon. My lawyer called me, a young man I'd met thanks to the investor, and who had been instrumental in formally registering my brand and protecting the original recipes. He told me, bluntly, that the old bakery building would be up for auction in 2 weeks. The bank hadn't found a direct buyer, and apparently the accumulated debts made a traditional sale unviable. He explained that I could participate in the auction without any problem, that it was completely legal, and that given the deteriorated condition of the property and the overdue maintenance fees, there probably wouldn't be many interested parties. I remained silent for several seconds, not because I doubted I could do it, but because I still didn't know if I wanted to. For days, I avoided thinking too much about the subject. I focused on work, coordinating deliveries for the school district, closing a contract with a university cafeteria, and preparing for the launch of a second trailer that was almost ready to operate. But the nights, when everything fell silent, brought me back to that old corner with the stone oven my grandfather built with his own hands when he was still dreaming of leaving something lasting. I couldn't help it. I went to the old place one gray afternoon. I stood in front of the facade, now covered in dust, its garish colors faded by the sun and the mural half erased by the weather. It was sad and pathetic, like a deteriorated version of what was once our pride. Through the dirty glass, I saw empty shelves, fallen signs, and an open, rusty cash register. Not even a shadow of what I knew remained. At that moment, I knew it wasn't out of nostalgia or outright revenge. It was out of justice. That place had to be revived. But not under the name of the one who defaced it. It had to be reborn under new hands with a renewed history that honored the good and closed the cycle of the bad. I showed up on auction day with a clean jacket, my lawyer by my side. And the decision made, there were only 3 of us in the room, and 2 backed out as soon as they saw the legal status of the property. I made a single offer. It was accepted in less than 15 minutes. I left there as if I'd been given back something stolen long ago. But not with anger. Rather with a calm, almost serene feeling. I took the keys, opened the door the next day, wearing thick gloves and a mask, and searched every corner. I found old photos, rusty utensils, expired bags of flour, and a notebook with scribbles I recognized as my sister's. They were promotional ideas, motivational quotes badly copied from Paint Test, and drawings of logos with English names that never resonated with anyone. I threw everything in the trash without a second thought. The only thing I kept was the stone oven. I had it cleaned and restored by a local craftsman, the same one who had built it with my grandfather. When he saw it, he told me he couldn't understand how anyone could have let it deteriorate like this. I replied that some people only know how to take care of what they build themselves, not what's effortlessly given to them. For the next few weeks, I worked behind closed doors. We renovated the space without luxuries, but with intention. We removed the garish color from the walls, opened windows, installed communal tables made of recycled wood, hanging plants, and shelves with fresh baked goods on display. The new name was Simple Borch Bakery. It had no last name, no past hanging from a sign, just a silent promise of quality and respect. And when we finally opened to the public, without prior announcement, without a paid campaign, without influencers or stacks, we did so with the certainty that people would come for what mattered: the flavor, the affection, and the memory of authenticity. And yes, they came. A few hours after the opening, on the first day, we were already lined up outside. I felt as if time had gone back, but without the pain. What was unexpected was seeing Julia appear mid-morning with a haggard face, a defeated posture, and a gesture that I couldn't tell if it was a complaint or a plea. He approached the counter, looked at me wordlessly, and after a few seconds said that this was his place. This brand was his. That what I was doing was taking what wasn't mine. I didn't raise my voice or argue. I offered him a glazed donut like the ones we used to make when we were kids, and replied that if I truly believed this place was his, I would have taken care of it, defended it, honored it. But she didn't. And now there was nothing left to complain about. My mother waited outside with her arms crossed, her gaze tense, and her mouth set. She didn't come in. She didn't say anything. I just watched her stand there like someone witnessing something that can't be undone. At that moment, I knew there would be no apologies, no redemption, no movie-like reconciliation. The only thing I could offer them was exactly what they had given me that Thanksgiving night: an open door to walk out of. But this time without the slam of a door. Update 4. A little over 2 years had passed since I left that house without saying goodbye. And against all odds, my life had taken a direction that not even I could have written with such precision. Since Back Porch Bakery opened, everything had changed at a pace that felt brutal, not in a bad way, but in the way that forces you to grow at a speed that doesn't allow you to look back with nostalgia, only with gratitude. The original trailer, the small Raynham, which had been my lifeline during the toughest months, was now just one more in a fleet of 3 fully operational units, each with its own equipment, assigned route, and loyal clientele. We had a centralized ordering system, a nighttime production line that never stopped, and finally a business structure that guaranteed something I always wanted to offer those who worked with me: stability, basic health insurance, humane hours, respectful treatment, and a very clear internal policy. No one here is replaceable by a new color on the wall. By then, my parents were no longer living in the house where we grew up. I learned from a source I never expected. The same Miguel, who still helped me on the wee hours of the morning, told me one night while we were making a rye bread note that they had lost their house months earlier due to a failed refinancing. They had tried to save the original location before the bank took it under its control. And to do so, they used the family home as collateral. The same one I grew up in, and the same one they evicted me from without remorse. They tried to sustain the unsustainable, believing that the facade and the lights were enough to keep a soulless business afloat. Today, they lived in a modest apartment north of the city, far from the neighborhood where it all began. in a place where no one recognized them or applauded them for having been part of the pan. Julia, for her part, had gone through several attempts at reinvention. After the bakery collapsed, she stepped away from it all for a few months. Then she returned with a social media account where she presented herself as a local business consultant, offering her services to other entrepreneurs who wanted to improve their digital presence. Out of morbid curiosity, I once logged into. I looked at her profile, and what I found was a mix of recycled phrases, generic marketing advice, and old photos of her in front of ovens she never knew how to use. Despite her efforts, the views were few and the comments almost non-existent. They say she still gets jobs as a community manager for small businesses that can't afford someone with real experience. His digital life seemed busier than his real life, but both showed the wear and tear of someone who had bet everything on an idea he couldn't sustain. Meanwhile, I was receiving the kind of calls I never dreamed would come. A small local channel contacted me to record a segment featuring stories of hard work and overcoming challenges, and although I hesitated at first, I accepted. Not to gain followers or fame, but because I knew there were many people out there going through the same thing as me, feeling replaceable, as if all their efforts were worthless. The recording was simple, without makeup or stagecraft. With the camera pointing at my grandfather's restored oven in the hands of those who now formed my team, I spoke from my gut, without poses, without scripts. I recounted what I experienced, without mentioning names, and ended my testimony with something I learned the hard way. That sometimes being kicked out of a place you love is the only way to find the place where you belong. A few days later, while I was checking emails between requests, I saw one I wasn't expecting. The address was the same one I deleted from my contacts over 2 years ago. It was a message from my mother. The tone was cold, direct, and straightforward. "Sam, we need to talk to you. Your dad is in a difficult situation, and we think you could help us with a guarantor for a loan. We're not asking for money, just your signature. It's a formality." I closed the email without responding immediately. I left it unread on the tray for 2 days, as if ignoring it would make the past disappear. But on the third day, I decided to reply. I did so with the calm that only healing brings. Not from resentment, but from clarity. I told them my accountant didn't allow me to take risks for third parties, that I'd learned the hard way not to compromise with people who'd taught me that family ties, when disrespected, way more than any financial debt. I wasn't cruel. I didn't insult. I didn't recall that give your business to your sister or get lost. Though every word still burned deep inside me, I simply attached a link to a local job board with a brief note. There are options here, and they're looking to start over. How did I do it? The response came that same night. This time from my father. It was a short, terse message. Barely a single line. "I never expected this from you." I stared at the screen, feeling something inside me clench. Not with pain, but with a strange sense of justice. I remembered every dawn, cleaning greasy trays while they slept. Every Saturday without going out because the inventory wouldn't take care of itself. Every time I told them I wanted to study something related to professional baking, they replied that it wasn't necessary because the business was already mine. And then I remembered the night they kicked me out without a blink, with such cruel certainty that it still seems incredible to me they didn't see it coming. 2 weeks later, we opened the third trailer. It was driven by one of the guys who started with me washing trays and was now the shift manager. At the opening, there was live music, balloons, free bread for the first 100 customers, and a line that wrapped around the block. While all this was happening, I sat on one of the benches outside the main location with a hot coffee in hand. Watching people come and go with bags full of bread and smiles on their faces, I allowed myself just a few seconds to think. In my parents and Julia, not with resentment, just with that mixture of sadness and relief that comes when you accept that not everything you lose is a tragedy. Sometimes losing is the only path to something better. Final update. Almost 3.5 years after the last time I slept under the family roof, I found myself one cold autumn morning, standing in the doorway of what was once my parents' bakery and was now my flagship store. Outside, the air smelled of dried leaves and freshly ground cinnamon. And although the routine had hardened me in many ways, that day everything had a different weight. The recognition the city council was going to give me for employing veterans, immigrants, and convicts was no ordinary trophy. It wasn't the kind of thing I'd worked for, but it was a painfully real confirmation that my life, which had quietly begun to crumble, had reached a point I wouldn't have believed possible years ago. The ceremony, simple and without grandiloquent protocols, was held in the same room where my mother taught us to knead dough when I could barely reach the height of the table. In the same space where my father had me sorting order forms and counting coins. Now that place was witness to a cycle that was coming to a close. But under my own rules, not under the shadow of humiliation or contempt. The shop was filled with employees, some already with families of their own. Others still finishing high school and finding work to be more than just a basic salary. And regular customers who had turned the bakery into a community gathering place. There were local reporters, council members, and even the mayor, who spoke of my ability to transform a broken legacy into an opportunity for others. It all felt like an uncomfortable dream. A mix of nostalgia and triumph. Among the attendees, almost at the back, were my parents. They arrived in modest clothing and wore the looks of someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. They sat together, shoulder to shoulder, away from the hustle and bustle, like two strangers observing other people's lives from a train window. Julia didn't come. I heard neighborhood gossip that she'd moved to another city to try to start over in a generic coffee shop. Just one of the many that come and go without leaving a trace. I felt neither sorrow nor relief, just indifference. During the ceremony, the presenter read a summary of my story. He didn't hide the difficult years or the reasons why the family business had collapsed. Although he avoided pointing the finger at anyone, he spoke of hard work, reinvention, and how the hardest blows can become the strongest foundations for building something new. They handed me a plaque that weighed more than I imagined. And in that instant I saw my mother wipe her eyes out of the corner of her eye with a forced expression of pride and a sense of shame that was evident even in the way she clutched her purse in her lap. When I stepped down from the stage and began handing out slices of apple pie, my grandmother's recipe, the one that never left the family, I was tempted to approach my parents. I hesitated because a part of me was still the wounded son who sought approval, even though I no longer needed it to move forward. Finally, I did it. I approached them and offered them a slice, without any speeches or innuendos. Just dessert and a bit of shared silence. My mother took it with trembling hands and told me in a low voice that if she had known everything I was capable of creating, she would have acted differently. My father looked down and barely murmured a thank you. There were no hugs, no theatrical apologies, no scenes of reconciliation. Only the harsh reality of those who realized too late what they've lost because they couldn't look beyond pride and favoritism. That evening, after closing time and the last guests had left amid laughter and bags of fresh bread, I sat alone in front of the restored stone oven. I turned on a warm light, made a cup of coffee, and replayed in my head every step that brought me there. I thought about the early mornings in the trailer, the afternoons cleaning other people's floors, the rejections, the betrayals, the bitter taste of the first defeat, and the silent sweetness of the first true victory. I realized I didn't feel hatred or a desire for revenge in the traditional sense. What I felt was closure because I had achieved what many promise, but few deliver, to live without owing anything to those who denied you the right to dream your way. Over time, the bakery became more than just a profitable business. It was a refuge, a home for those who arrived without knowing me, but decided to stay. The employees brought their children on weekends. Customers shared stories and recipes, and even some old friends of my parents, those who used to cross the sidewalk to avoid greeting me, came. Now they sat at communal tables, asking for advice on their own ventures. I never once again discussed the issue of inheritance, or the lost business, or the family I chose to leave behind. Because in that process, the only thing I truly gained was the freedom to choose my own destiny, free from the chains of guilt and the weight of emotional debt. The award was hung on the most discreet wall in the establishment, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that no one, not even those who believe they have all the power over your life, can rob you of the dignity of starting over. That lesson my parents never wanted to learn was the greatest gift they unwittingly gave me when they kicked me out. And although today I can say I owe them nothing, I know that debt, the one of silence, the one of effort, the one of wasted time, was settled the day I finally managed to live for myself and not to please those who only knew how to belittle what I was capable of building.